All right, hello and welcome. So today we're going to be talking about the bird. We're going to be talking about Zephyr and her rework and her current kind of status. So first and foremost, let's kind of go over what has changed with her. So her 1 and her 2 were rolled into just her 1, which is a very good change that people have been asking for quite some time. So now she is very, very fast and can also dive bomb by just aiming down and hitting 1, which is outstanding. Also, though, those first 2 parts are the useful bits. If you're on the ground and you hold it, you can charge it up and then jump and hover. This exists. I don't know what the kind of intended use case is for that hover. I found one use for it one time, which was to get a mining spot that was just slightly too high off the ground for me to get regularly. And anywhere else, I haven't seen any real combat applications for it. Most of that is due to me not being able to fly up into the air and then hold 1 in order to, like, stop and then hover, which is, like, the way you would actually get an advantageous position out of the hover, but having to go from the ground and this long charge in order to do the hover just isn't advisable. So her 1 is significantly better. It's got, like, the dive bomb rolled into it and all that business. But the hover bit confuses me. I suppose it's a feature that you just don't really have to use, because if you want to go straight up, you can just do that. But yeah, the hover's a bit odd. Other than that, her 2 is obviously new, because her old 2 got rolled into her 1. So now we have Air Burst. So this is basically an air grenade. That is a shockwave that knocks down enemies. It has a base range of 8, which is pretty good. And with this build, it is at actually about 16 meters, which is very solid for knocking down an entire room of enemies, provided, of course, they're not immune to knockdowns at the current time. So this is decently solid, and this is also what you're going to use in order to make your tornadoes bigger. But we're going to talk about that once we actually get to the 4. So with that, we have our 3, which is just normal business. Its animation changed to be slightly longer, which is not really a big deal. This ability is kind of the same as it ever was, which is fine. This ability has always been, like, pretty decently solid, but occasionally you'll find that some stuff will sneak in there and get you just a little bit, which, if you use, like, at least one defensive mod, isn't going to kill Zephyr, even at, like, decently high level. But if you're trying to go, like, endless or something, maybe you should be worried about it. With that, 3 is definitely totally solid. The 2 gives you the space you need to recast it whenever you need to do that, and that stuff's great. The thing here, the problem that I'm having with the rework is her 4. So her 4 got some pretty massive improvements. There's some really good stuff happening here, but I just don't feel like it's enough even after the further changes to it. So, cast your 4, everything's normal. If you put your 2 on your 4, it makes the tornadoes bigger. Mostly taller visually, although they do gain some width for picking up enemies. It's just not really visual. And the thing about these is that they still have some problems. You can hold down ADS and a tornado will zoop over to you. Whichever tornado is closest will try and go to where you're aiming. This is only somewhat reliable, I have found, and the main problem with these tornadoes is that whenever they pick up enemies, enemies don't stay in them. And the reason that's a big problem is because you can now shoot the tornadoes, and whenever you do damage to them, that damage will go to all enemies that are caught in the tornado. So in an ideal scenario, you really want the enemies to actually be stuck in there and not just flop out of it whenever. And especially if you're not directly controlling these with ADS, the tornadoes don't do a great job of seeking out enemies and are not particularly fast, so if the enemy is on the move, they're never going to catch them. So there's some problems around the edges, mostly to do with just the consistency of your 4 and it not being annoying. It's significantly less annoying than it used to be, because it used to be a nightmare for teammates because they couldn't just shoot the tornado to damage everyone in it. But as it currently stands, it's still kind of a pain in the ass sometimes, and I usually find myself just skipping it in general, unless I don't really want to murder the enemies, and then I'll just throw it at them to keep them busy, kinda. With that, let's show the build real quick, and then we'll get to the test. So this is pretty much all duration, pretty much all range, and a lot of efficiency. Strength is not a particularly needed thing unless you're going to use a build that revolves around Jetstream. I personally didn't find that to be kind of like the most effective way to play a Zephyr unless you're going to do a gimmick with a weapon that has travel time. But in general, this works pretty well. You can do bounties with this, whatever. And for those of you that do not have Primed Vigor and you want a replacement for it, Vitality or Redirection, whatever, just one of your basic defensive mods. For those times when you're going to get hit by an AoE or whatnot, you definitely want to live through it. With that, this build is pretty self-explanatory in its use case. Because your 4 is not amazing, I am going to use it here just to kind of show it, but it's not outstanding. You are always going to be using your 3, as was always the case for Zephyr, and it is okay, but even on this, like, you'll notice enemies flopping out of it even before they're dead, like, bloop, this guy escaped, like, stuff like that is just real unfortunate, because, like, whenever you get them into these, you'd really want them to be stuck in them, because that's, like, kind of what the kind of stated intention of this ability became, I suppose I should say. And that would be great, it just can't quite accomplish that. And of course, you can't proc enemies that are in it, so I wouldn't be able to reduce their armor because it's object damage. You also can't crit the tornadoes, but I don't feel like that stuff's necessary. You just really want it to be a more reliable form of a crowd control more than anything, I feel. As you can see, my 3 is still doing a really solid job of keeping me protected. And your 2 can be used as an emergency knockdown for whenever you recast your 3. And in this scenario, obviously, I don't need to use my 1 because the 1 is very, very fast and is usually going to be more reserved for giant areas like PoE with a build like this. However, there are plenty of long hallways in the regular tile sets that you will be able to go down very, very quickly by using your 1. But yeah, it's totally functional. It's got, like, all the ingredients to, like, do a thing. It's just one of the ingredients is a little lacking. If her 4 was improved, like, pretty significantly to, like, hold enemies better, be more aggressive about picking them up, or simply just have the tornadoes be significantly larger and be able to hold enemies, like, there's a lot of ways to go about making her 4 good enough, but I feel like right now it's just not quite there. Everything else around the edges, though, is very solid. I enjoy her new 2, mostly because it got the extra speed burst, which really helped it out. It was much too slow previously. But yeah, like, she's got solid stuff going on. Her 4 just needs a little extra oomph, and then she'll really be there. She's kind of in a similar place to how Atlas is, although I think Atlas is better off overall. Anyway, that is going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you tomorrow.